Well, I'd left school at 14, but I'd done all sorts of jobs. I didn't get into television until I was about 30. And the reason I got into television was that I managed to wangle myself a job really, writing book jackets for medical publishers. The first book I did a jacket on was called Tumours of the Urinary Bladder. Remember that? And it was me doing that, and there was Gilly Cooper, who used to work for the same company before she was Gilly Cooper, of course, when she was Gilly Cooper, if you follow me, sitting there writing the same sort of thing. So Gilly Cooper left, and I took over her job, that sort of thing there. So I was doing that, and we had a Canadian temp, and the bookseller was the trade magazine for books, the book trade. And remember she said to me, one lunchtime, she just said to me, she said to me, yeah, no, we fancy a job in television. I said, I'd love to work in television. I knew nothing about, I didn't even know the difference between ITV and BBC, and that's the perfect truth. I knew one had commercials and one didn't, but that was it, we didn't know anything about it at all, how it's financed, anything like that. She said, well, I was in London then, and she said, you'd have to go to Manchester, because the job's in Granada television in Manchester. I said, okay, anyway, I don't mind at all. So that's how it happened first. So my first job was in Granada television as a script writer, writing scripts for the announcers, continuity scripts for the announcers, that sort of thing too. And also, which is invaluable, was making film and video trailers to promote, promotion department, you see, to promote the script. Well, that was the whole training in it, because I knew nothing about editing. I do tape and film really, wasn't at all in those days. There's no 16 and 35mm, those sort of things too. So they gave me complete grounding and taught me how to do that. And I did that for a year and loved it. I thought, well, I might stay on at Granada, may not, depending how it goes. And then Thames Television was formed in London, brand new. Well, by this time, I'd had a year's experience in Granada, working in Granada. So I rang up Thames, as such as it was, and said, there was on air then, I think, and said what I was doing in promotion department at Granada, and was anything going at Thames? And they said, well, yeah, there's something going, but you'll have to audition like anybody else and come and see us, which I did, and got the job. I wanted to come back to London then, basically. Manchester's a great city, I like Manchester very much, but I wanted to come back to London that time for personal reasons. And that was the job really there. And of course it was a good job, I enjoyed it very much too. But then of course, once I got into Thames, I really wanted to get onto a show. I was doing promotion, which is no show, particularly you're just advertising the company and what they do, and interesting within its limits, but I'd done that. And I was in fact doing that with Thames for 3 years, writing off to everything. Now, the highlight of Thames's output, light entertainment-wise, was This Is Your Life, of course. Fabulous show, millions of viewers. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And I applied 3 times for a job on The Life, and 3 times was turned down. Every time there was a job that came up, whatever it was, I applied for it and got turned down, because in those days, you see, I think now it's even worse, but you had to have a university education, and I didn't have a university education. I'd been to university and I was a baker. But anyway, I got turned down yet again for The Life. By this time, Malcolm Morris was the producer, a very successful producer. And I got turned down by The Life. And then one of their team, they're all set to go, and one of their team got another job and went somewhere else. So Malcolm rang me up and said, you were pipped at the post by somebody else, but if you're still interested, the job's going. And I took it, and that's how I started as a first-year researcher, which meant, of course, you were freelance and don't need staff perks or nothing like that. All that went out the window. And taken on a 9-month contract as a junior researcher. This is how I started on The Life. Oh, it was always such a glamorous show, an interesting show. Eamon had so much charm with him too, and that thing. It was very instrumental to the way he did it. And it was such a genuinely decent man. He had a family himself, and he cared about a family. So yes, I did watch it, grew up watching it really, I suppose. In fact, the very first face I saw on television was Eamon Andrews. My little tiny 9-inch screen, I think now. And if you told me then, I'd be working with him. But then things do sometimes happen, and Curly did in that case too. So yes, I was well aware of the show. I'm very much aware of the kudos of the show too. It was, as I said, and Thames was a big, important London station, and that was, for light entertainment, that was certainly the highlight of their output, no doubt about it at all. When you're a researcher on the show, And I was a very junior researcher then, but even then, it's your decision that counts. You know, you're there and you're meeting the family, the nearest and dearest, and that sort of thing, and the people who are involved with them and that. And, you know, you have to, a lot of it is gut reaction, really. You have to take that decision yourself, what you're going to do, who you're going to see. Common sense is what is required, and that you must work upon. And also, if you're working for a show, then you must care about that show, otherwise don't work for it. Everyone cared about it, but then that's Jack Crawshaw, the producer, because he cared about it immensely and instilled that in you. And that came across, you see, with the life. I mean, he was marvellous with Eamon. I mean, Eamon trusted him impeccably. That, again, is essential. Any show where you're dealing with the personal lives of people, and it is, of course you're presenting a professional front, of course you are, that's what it is, it's a glossy show, but it is built on people's personal experiences, mementos, this sort of thing too. And the script, of course, is provided by the participants of the show. They're the ones who are giving you what it's all about, and that sort of thing too. So, of course you have to respond to that trust. And This Is Your Life would not have gone on long before I joined it, and long after I left it. Would not have gone that way if people did not abide by those principles. We'd have weekly meetings anyway about how we're going to do. First of all, you'd have an autopsy on the show you just done. And again, it's very difficult because it had to fit a commercial half hour. And you might have literally an hour sometimes of superb material. What the hell do you cut out? You know, so that could be a nightmare, believe you me. And heartbreaking at times, because there's some lovely golden pieces that you just cannot put in a commercial half hour. And then, of course, all the researchers and everybody else would put forward what names they thought were right and what were good. And then what you would do, you would find out, you get all the cuts and that sort of thing. Cuttings, the press cuttings from on records. If they're a famous person, of course, don't forget, it weren't only famous people that we did, but quite a few people were not famous, lifeboatmen and people like that. We did extraordinary things, there were no cuttings on them at all. So you had to work out what would be a good show, and also a show that somebody would enjoy, because again, it only works, the life would not have gone on week after week, year after year, decade after decade, but for the goodwill of the people doing it and people wanting to do it as well. So you had to work out if the sort of thing, because some people are private, some people don't want anything like that at all, Although it was always an accolade, it's a tribute, it's always a tribute to somebody at all. So you had to work out with the right sort of persons, and indeed the people involved, if it would, you don't want to drive someone mad with worry or things like that, it would be okay too. So when that was all done, then you'd start researching the show, and again, very tentatively approach people, because you don't want to build up hopes and then not be able to fulfil them. There's no joy in that at all. You produce a feasibility report, FESA as we called it, and then you'd write out what if you wanted to do the show, you'd hardly do the cons, you'd put the pros and the reasons why it should be done, and then that would be up for discussion long before the scriptwriters got anywhere near it. Although scriptwriters were always, Tom and Roy were always part of it, but you put the reasons why you think it should be done and what could be done, and the nice things or this, that and the other, So you present that, and a feasibility report should be what it says, a feasibility on the possibility of doing the show. So you wouldn't say, well, it's no good doing it. Don't waste everyone's time with a feasibility report. You have to work it out positively, and if you thought it would work, then you present that and the reasons why, and then that would be had a production meeting, and then people would decide, people being the team, and it was usually done to the vote and that sort of thing too, as to what would be done and what wouldn't be done. If I was researching a subject, then somebody else would be researching another subject, and somebody else would be researching another subject. So you get a weekly output, And of course the shows had to be done very quickly because it's a secret. It was quite genuine that way. It was a total secret for the subject. So the longer you spend doing a thing, the more chance there is of it leaking out. And we have to cancel shows because it had leaked out and done that. So therefore, we aimed to get a show done in 2 weeks. I mean, sometimes a bit longer. I mean, Ali took a bit longer than 2 weeks, it was such a big show. That'd be a good average. And don't forget you're flying in people from all over the globe, Australia, America, wherever. And of course, you can't just ring John Wayne or somebody like that and say, you're ready next week to come across. It all has to be worked out. But that's amazing what people did do. It's extraordinary what people did do. These extraordinarily busy and successful people would make time because they cared enough for the subject to do so. And then again was why it worked. It really was a tribute. There was no fee for appearing on The Life. I mean, obviously expenses were covered, but no fee at all. So, I mean, if you did it, it's of course something you wanted to do. Well, The Life was a good title, actually, because The Life was a way of life, believe you me. I mean, it was a 7-day-a-week job, and virtually 24 hours, because if you're ringing India, as we often did, America all the time, then the time difference is amazing. I mean, to talk to somebody in the evening in Los Angeles, it'd be about 3 or 4 in the morning. And that was it. I mean, you worked 7 days a week. So that's why I think we got so close, because your social life was totally bound up. And of course you were travelling all the time with people too. It was totally bound up with your professional life. There was no break at all, really. But there again, if you had a job as fulfilling as that, you didn't need any more, did you? Yeah, I'd always been writing. I had written a couple of books. I mean, we're not talking about Jeffrey Archer or Judy Cooper here, but I had written a couple of books and they'd come out. So I'd always had written, always a few magazine articles, things like that. But now and then what I used to love to do was if a feaser of mine had been accepted, as on Kiriti Karnawa, for example, or Beryl Gray, wonderful dancer. The great thing was, because it would be your idea, and then to actually research the story, which you would have to do, and then to actually write it and present it. It's a great satisfaction, It really is superb. You've dreamed up the idea in the first place, and that again was a great thing with the live series. That's what encouraged you to do. People did that. I think people love also to have a peek behind the scenes, of what's going on, and all these. I mean, as I say, we don't only do famous people. That is not true. But whoever you are, and whatever you've done, and some of them have done great feats of valour and things like that. Whatever you've done, it's nice to know a bit of the story behind it. As a researcher, you had to really play a downstage part as much as you really could, because you see, the idea was if people knew you and your name or your face, then if you said, my name's so-and-so, and you got the wrong person or something, they'd know at once what you're up to. And of course the whole thing, with The Life, I mean, we lost Elaine Stritch. Elaine Stritch used to stay at the Savoy. For that very reason, I mean, it wasn't me, but it could well have been. Somebody rang up the Savoy, hoping to speak to her husband, whose name I forget now, Mr. Spoke, his name was, and asked to speak to him, and this voice said, what is it? And I said, well, it's very confidential, we're hoping to do a life on Elaine Stritch, it would be wonderful, but it has to be a big secret, of course, so you mustn't know. What do you think about it? And this voice said, there's Elaine Stritch. So that was never done. Yes, of course pressure was there, but you had a team behind you, see. As I said before, our producer Jack, who was, skipper of the boat, such as it is, it was marvellous, and would understand things, and you could talk to him and that sort of thing. You had a whole support system around you, i.e. the team, as I said, and we're all personal friends. It wasn't just good night this, that and the other, we stayed each other, and when we had a night off, we'd be out with each other, having a drink or a meal, whatever you do with friends, and still do. I mean, it's amazing. My closest friends are actually still people I met on The Life, no shadow of it, including Jack. That's why it works so well. There's no backstabbing at all, and I mean that absolutely sincerely, there really wasn't. So if you were under pressure, you'd say to someone, look, can you give us a hand, do this, that and the other, and they would. Oh, well, I joined, as I told you, as junior researcher, but then each year you came back as a first-year researcher, second-year researcher, and then after that I became a programme associate, which is sort of, I suppose, really a senior researcher as such, which was good because it meant that virtually, I mean, Jack was in charge of the whole show, of course he was, but I was sort of, the researchers were my responsibility, I could say this, that, and the other, you know, and did. So that worked out well. And I did that for, I think, years and years, you know, about 4 or 5 years, I suppose, until I left. But so I was programme associate on that, and I wanted to become a producer. And of course, Jack was doing a superb job. So I became a producer, I think, on the kids' shows, one of the kids' shows, because I had to work at the time. And but I used to keep my finger in with the life as such, and write the odd script. But then Eamon, they brought back, they being Thames Television, brought back What's My Line, which had started with Eamon, and then David Jacobs did that for a while on the BBC, and then Thames brought it back, and I was producing then, I was a producer then, producing Eamon on What's My Line, which was great, you know. Oh, it would be the apex of my career. The privilege of working for a decade with people you love and admire and respect. I mean, no one can say that, can they? Well, again, as Adam Faith said years ago when he was being interviewed by somebody on television, he said, whatever part you're playing, if you're in the entertainment industry, whatever, if you're a runner, a researcher, an artist, whatever, you're having a better time than somebody who isn't in it is right. I agree with him, absolutely. And for me to actually be that particular segment of a show that actually specialised in seeing people's lives, and of course by their lives that's going back people they work with and things like that, fantastic, I'd have paid to have done it.